Hi, my name is Sue Mason, and I am the formerly incarcerated executive director and co founder of What's Next Washington. And I've always been that person who thinks, if I just try hard enough, everything's going to work out. My story's not unlike many others. I had been through years of trauma as a child. I suffered from drug and alcohol addiction since my teens, and I had endured 2 decades of domestic violence. In other words, I struggled to find my way. In the 90s, I worked in residential lending, but by the end of the decade, in 2000, things had gotten really bad, and I jumped down the rabbit hole of my disease after I quit my job. Then things got really, really bad, and within 2 years, I was sentenced to 15 months in federal prison, a $30,000 fine, and 3 years of probation. After I got out of prison in 2003, I began to take control of and responsibility for my life. But what I faced since then were constant no's, setbacks, and the agony of having to start over and over and over. In 2003, though, when I got out, the refinance boom was on. And since I had not violated the trust of any employer, I went back to my field. I was still in the halfway house when I was hired as a loan processor. I quickly became a loan officer again and was doing really well. However, in 2006, Washington State passed a law requiring loan officers to be licensed, no felonies allowed, and I lost my career. I was pretty devastated. I searched for work in my industry, an industry that was imploding all around me, trying to do something else that did not require a license, perhaps as a loan processor again. But it didn't matter that I'd already been working and that I'd moved on. The story was always the same, no criminal backgrounds allowed. And you may not know this, but during the Great Recession, the unemployment rate for people with conviction histories was over 60%, and I was not immune to that. I can't count how many times I've interviewed for a job, been called back for second and third interviews, had my references checked, ultimately been offered the job and told that it was contingent on a background check. I would say, okay, here's what's on there, and I'd be told, don't worry, it's going to be okay. I also cannot count how many times I've called my friends and family to say, hey, I got the job, only to call them back a few later to tell them that the offer had been rescinded. Eventually, though, I found a job as a housing counselor, saving people's homes from foreclosure. It didn't pay as much, but I was grateful to have it. But the foreclosure crisis ended, and I was laid off in July of 2015. And let me tell you, I was scared to begin searching for work again, but I always remained hopeful. I thought that if I just kept trying, that the years themselves would be a testament to my rehabilitation and that I would not be rejected anymore. So, in 2015, 12 years after my release, I started looking for work, thinking, surely it's been long enough. And wouldn't you know, right away, I was hired by US Bank in their underwriting department. I was given my offer letter and my start date, contingent on a background check. I knew this was coming, but remember, I was hopeful. I told them what was on there and what I had accomplished since then. They pulled the background check and told me that, unfortunately, SEC regulations and other certification and licensing laws precluded me from working for them, and they rescinded their job offer. The woman in HR was as devastated as I was, and we both cried. As I continued to search for work, I would get so many responses to my resume. They'd say, you're exactly what we're looking for. Can you come in and interview? And I'd go through weeks of interviews and background checks and offers and be told no. And so I just got to the point where I was asking people, hey, what's your policy on hiring people with convictions, especially felonies? And they're like, oh no, zero tolerance. And I was getting scared. It was taking months to find a job. And clearly, my industry did not want me. So I thought, what could I do using my experience and my skills? I had done some political advocacy around the foreclosure crisis, so I thought, I'd be a great political organizer. And I set out to change careers, and guess what? I got hired. SEIU 775, a local union, was looking for a political organizer. I went through rounds of interviews and was chosen one of two candidates. I had my offer letter, I had my start date, contingent on a background check. I called right away and said, listen, here's what's on there. It's been 12 years since my release. My references will attest to my character. I've done hundreds of people's mortgages, and I've saved people's homes for most of those 12 years. And they said, don't worry, it's fine. We're looking for murder or arson. And I said, that's not me. So 5 weeks later, on the first day of work, I sat in the lobby with the other new hire, and I was told that I would not be able to go upstairs. I was told that the HR director had pulled my background check that morning and wanted to have a conversation with me, and they sent me home. It was so humiliating. So that HR director called me later in the day and she grilled me like I was a criminal. It was really shocking. And she said, look, I just can't take the chance. And I was gutted. So this time it wasn't regulations, it was bias. And the stigma of my having been to prison would not allow her to see who I was. You know, the shame of this has left me wondering, when does my sentence truly end? And at what point will I have ever paid my debt? When will I ever have to stop going in front of unlicensed, untrained judges? Why do private citizens get to reconvict me after I did my time and served my sentence? Because my punishment was 15 months in federal prison, 3 years of probation, and a $30,000 fine in 2002. I wasn't sentenced to a lifetime of unemployment, and yet here I was, no after no after no. And like I said, you know, the years that I've been out should be a testament to my rehabilitation and not a black mark forever. 6 years later, since 2015, and I'm still out, like millions of others, still pushing forward. And really, you know, if you think about it, I should be at US Bank today, or SEIU 775, with 6 years of paychecks and 6 years of contributions to my retirement and 6 years of benefit. But that's just not the case. I had years of experience. I had the references and the education, skills, and training that was required every time. I was qualified. Even so, these employers were either afraid of or did not have the tools they needed to move forward past what they saw on the background check. So, after years of this and driven by these no's, I decided to do something about it, and I co-founded What's Next Washington. It's why we focus our work on helping employers change their practices and policies. We have created tools and strategies to help employers move past their fear and maintain safe and productive workplaces. In other words, we help employers operationalize their commitments to second chances and to diversity, equity, and true inclusion. Rescinding offers to otherwise qualified candidates, especially years after a conviction, prevents millions of us from moving on from mistakes and achieving the long-term economic stability we need and deserve. And it keeps employers from the talent that they need and deserve. If you're wondering how we get through this to the other side, well, it has to be together, working with directly impacted people like me.